This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and no, this is not Microsoft Surface Pro 6 or Pro 7, though I can understand if you think so. This is the Chuwi UBook Pro, and it is obviously a Surface clone. What's interesting is we've reviewed quite a few Chuwi products over the years, and this is a Chinese kind of Microsoft Surface clone product. And it used to be heavy, it used to be chunky, it used to be clearly not as nice, and now they're really getting it down. And of course, the selling point here is going to be that the price tag is lower. How good is it? Is it worth it? We're going to find out now. So the UBook Pro is a pretty new product. Right now, I think they're out of stock of the Intel Core M3 version that we have. They do have the Celeron in stock. So you can get it on Chuwi's website, which might seem a little iffy to you if you don't feel good about that. GearBest and Banggood sell it. And also on Amazon, they have the Celeron version. And they sell the keyboard on Amazon and the pen for less than even any of the Chinese importers, 30 bucks a piece, which is pretty darn good. So the keyboard on this, as you might have noticed, is pretty much a direct clone of the Surface Pro type cover. It's even got a kind of, feels slightly like Alcantara on the back. Of course, it actually isn't finished, though. And it's got white backlit keys, and it's a little bit like the previous generation, insofar as there's no space between the keys. They butt against each other. It's not a bad keyboard, but it is more flexible than the Microsoft type cover. So if you don't like that bouncy kind of thing, either lay it flat on the table instead of in that propped up position, or get a Bluetooth keyboard instead. So inside of here, before we talk about the pen experience, this is a 12.3-inch IPS display that supports pen and touch, and no weird pen technology. It's the same N-Trig sort of technology that we see used in, well, Surface Pro products and also in some HP Spectre products. So compatible, yes, you can use the Surface Pro pen with it. I tested it, works just fine. The Intel Core M3 is the 8100, and that's the Y series, which is a 4.5 watt CPU, so it's even more low power than the U series Ultrabook CPUs. And Microsoft used to use that for their base model, in fact, on Surface Pro, like with the Surface Pro 6 family. Now they're just starting with the Core i3 instead. Anyway, it's a dual-core 4-thread CPU, and as you might guess, it's about half as fast as a quad-core CPU. And it actually does pretty well, considering the fact that it is a lower-power CPU. It also doesn't require a fan, so it's fanless, which is a hallmark also of the Surface Pro models these days, so no noise. And given that it's an M3, also, really, it doesn't get hot to the touch, and the core temperatures, when running more demanding benchmarks, I mean, really nice and low, 60s to 70s centigrade, where 100 max is allowable, and you'll often see Ultrabooks come close to 100 degrees centigrade max, so good there. RAM is soldered on board, 8 gigs of low-power DDR3. There's no 16 gig option. There's that. If you need more, well, I mean, this is not a power user's machine, obviously. This is equivalent to, say, an older dual-core Surface Pro kind of machine. The SSD is a SATA 3, not an NVMe, totally fair for a price if you're talking about something that's like $369 or $400 or so, to buy. It is M.2, but it's really hard to get this thing open. The back is glued on, which is true of most Windows tablets, so you're probably not going to be upgrading it. It's 256 gig SSD inside of it. And it's not the old, slow, sort of like removable micro SD style storage. It's a true SATA 3 interface. So performance on it is okay. It's SATA 3. It's not NVMe, but it's not horrible either. Intel 3165 AC Wi-Fi with Bluetooth inside as well. A 2-megapixel front camera and a 5-megapixel rear camera. Both of them are okay, not fantastic. Again, for the price, hey, not complaining too much. For the build and design, they've come a long way, Chuwi. Instead of heavy and clunky, a lot heavier than you might expect, all that sort of thing, creaky, no. This thing is nice and rigid and firm. Maybe not quite as rigid as Surface Pro, but most of us don't spend our days trying to turn our tablets into pretzels either, do we? So it's a metal casing, it's well done, it's compact, it's 780 grams, it's 8.5 millimeters thin, so it's pretty much right there in Surface clone territory instead of being much bigger, much heavier, much uglier. Yes, it has bezels, just like Surface Pro 6 and 7 do. Yes, bezels are kind of handy with tablets sometimes because it gives you a place to hold them without accidentally activating the screen. The kickstand is not at all like a Surface Pro kickstand, though. It's sort of like what HP has used for some of their convertible tablet models with the kickstand. It's a U-bracket kind of design, and it is not super sturdy feeling. If you really grabbed it and wrenched it and you had big muscles, you probably could distort it. I don't know. But if you treat it nicely, it will probably continue to work. The range of propping up is 0 to 145 degrees, which is reasonable. It feels kind of notchy to me, though. That doesn't feel so premium and smooth like, say, a Surface Pro does, or even HP's implementation of this kind of U-bracket design. But it gets the job done, and it's reasonably rigid. When writing on it, it stood up to my hand pressure, but if you press on it really hard, it will sink. Besides the obviously lower price versus the Surface Pro, the port situation here is much better as well. You have two USB-A 3.0 ports. You have a USB-C Gen 1 port and mini display port, and of course you have a headphone jack, and you have a little micro SD card slot up top. So it's kind of nice that you don't immediately have to run to little USB-C docks or something like that. The charger is a barrel pin connector, and it plugs in near the top on the side. Why on the top? I don't know. It's kind of weird. You can charge it via USB-C as well. I'm not going to complain that they gave us a barrel pin charger, because it does free up that USB-C port to use with other things if you want to keep it plugged in at the same time. Choice is up to you. The pen with this gets slightly confusing, even for me, the pen lady. So Chuwi has a couple of high pens, that they call it. And there's the high pen H3, which is 1096 pressure levels. There's the H6, which is their latest model, which is what you can get on Amazon for just 30 bucks, and that's 4096 pressure levels. So it's comparable to the Microsoft Surface pen. And there's the H5, which is what Chuwi sent along for this review unit, and I don't know where that's supposed to sit in the pressure level line of things. It felt pretty similar to the Surface pen, but I felt like I could get a little bit more heavy pressure going as I did the graduation with the lines with the Surface Pro pen. But yeah, you'll get the one with 4096 pressure levels anyway if you buy the H6 on Amazon or wherever you source it from. It's pretty good. It's like N-Trig. You know, most N-Trig, except for Surface, Microsoft does a little magic to help a little bit. Things like diagonal line jitter are pretty much a fail, which is what we see with many N-Trig digitizers, like an HP Spectres that are considerably more expensive, and even with some Wacom AES digitizers, typically used in a lot of Dell convertibles. Other than that, though, the pressure curves on this are actually very nice. I enjoyed using Clip Studio Paint and the ink pen and doing my lines and getting the nice, fat, juicy line that you want as you increase the pressure curves. It's pretty good, and the circles that you can draw and all that sort of thing are fine. This is not for heavy lifting. If you want to just draw in Clip Studio Paint, it has enough horsepower for that sort of thing. If you want to do a little light Photoshop drawing, don't do 50-layer masterpiece of digital painting art, you know, it's fine for that. But this is a dual-core M3, so it's not meant for doing your mega masterpiece kind of thing with 50 layers. You get the idea. Certainly not for video editing. We have Intel UHD 615 graphics, which sits below, as you can imagine, UHD 620 graphics. Not the sharpest knife in the drawer when it comes to graphics. In fact, sometimes it scores 50% lower than UHD 620 in some benchmarks. So it's still enough to use Clip Studio Paint or to do some digital painting in Photoshop, or the ideal note-taking device that's light, easy to take, cheap, on the go. That's the kind of thing it's for. The display on this is actually pleasantly good. It's, again, a 12.3-inch display. It's full HD, so it's not as high resolution as Surface Pro 7, but then again, that does help with battery life. It gets exceptionally bright. We're talking about well over 400 nits of brightness. The color accuracy on it is reasonably good. The blue is a bit too high, which we see on a lot of displays, easily fixed with calibration. Overall, good stuff there. So how about battery life? It has a 38 watt-hour battery, which is less than the Surface Pro 7, sure, but it also has a lower resolution display and a lower power CPU. For the usual productivity tests and streaming video with the brightness set to 150 nits, it averaged about 6 hours on a charge, which is decent, not bad. Speakers on this, by the way, they are stereo speakers, but they're not very loud at all. As for Chuwi not being a household name in the US, and they do sell in Europe and China and in the US, they do have a US support line. I can't speak to how good their support is or what it's like if you have to mail it in for service, if it goes someplace in the United States or if it goes to China. That's going to be the little, you know, you take a chance by paying a lot less money and see how that goes for you. So that's the Chuwi UBook Pro. Again, we have the Core M3 model. It's also available with an Intel Celeron, probably for a little bit less money. And seriously, if you can find this for $500 with the keyboard and with the pen, then it's understandable that if you want to save some money and not go with the Surface Pro, and you don't need a super lot of power, you're not going to be video editing and all that sort of stuff, well, you know, Yeah. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos and do hit that notification bell.